North Korea's torpedoing of South Korean warship Cheonan in 2010. Its shelling of the south frontline island of Yeonpyeong-do. A series of provocations by the North have left inter-Korean relations at a new low. Then in February 2016, the two Koreas scrapped what was seen as the last remaining symbol of inter-Korean cooperation, the Kaesong Industrial Complex. Two Koreas, one people. Nearly 7 decades since the war that divided the nation in two, how different are South and North Korea? What sets them apart, and what do the two Koreas still share in common? This, through the lens of North Korea's former Deputy Ambassador to London, Thae Yong-ho, on Peninsula 24 today. Now, today I want to begin with the frosty inter-Korean relations. So I want to go back to 2010, 2011. So there were provocations that North Korea launched against South Korea. There was that sinking of South Korea's warship, the Cheonan, which killed several, and as well as the shelling on Yeonpyeong Island, which are the frontline islands between North and South Korea. Now, did you have a good understanding of that back then? Were you in the know?
Yes, of course, that incident were also, widely reported by North Korean media at that time. But what you see, the rumors, spread after that incident inside North Korea was that before that incident, North Korean Navy, even by North Koreans, cannot be the match, with South Korean Navy, because South Korean Navy, in terms of equipment and war power, so far has been, regarded in a way of overwhelming North Korean Navy. But after this Cheonan incident, many people said that North Korean Navy can, deal with the South Korean Navy. And so this proves that when South Korean army did not retaliate properly, it created kind of, I think, the wrong image to North Korean army, that whatever they do or whatever provocations they make, they cannot be
held accountable.
Or South Korea or America will not, respond.
Did you believe the fabrication that the North Korean regime was making, or did you know that it was actually in the responsibility of North Koreans?
That instant, especially the Yeonpyeong, the bombing took place on a very, this significant day, in my life, because on that day, there was a very important meeting between DPRK delegation and European Union delegation in Pyongyang. So official, a delegation arrived, and the talk was expected to open at 10 a.m. in the morning. And when both sides came into the meeting room, all of a sudden, the European Union delegation informed the North Korean delegation that they cannot go on this meeting and they have to leave the meeting room. So we asked why. So they said because, they were instructed by Brussels that they have to cancel this meeting because of Yeonpyeong Island bombing. And we explained to European side that it is not the North Koreans who started, So there was a little bit, tit for tat, discussions for that. And then the delegation left in several hours, for they back to Europe, without any negotiations. And so I really clearly, even now, remember all those, the happenings inside North Korea on that day.
There are a couple of incidences, key incidences relating to the inter-Korean affairs, and another one of them, so the Cheonan warship sinking and the shelling on the Yeonpyeong Island is one, but there's another one which is Mount Kumgang Resort.
Yes.
So the halt in tours. So there was a very active tourism of South Koreans into North Korea, Mount Kumgang Resort, which of course Hyundai Asan built.
Yes.
South Korea is a conglomerate. And there was a killing or shooting at a South Korean tourist, which halted all tours there. What was the impression that you got when that incident happened? Were you in the know about that as well?
Of course, it was even broadcasted by North Korean media, but later on, North Korean regime cheated North Korean public that South Korean side asked for, the apology for this incident, where North Korea extended, the apology, but South Korean side didn't accept it, and then they, they canceled, all those, the tourisms by South Koreans to Kumgang Mountain. So they started to, they denounce, South Korean authority for that, the incident.
What about the joint industrial complex in Kaesong? The shutdown of that complex, how much of an economic impact did that have on North Korea?
Oh, it has really, great impact on North Korea. First, the Kaesong city, which is the border city, with military demarcation line, used to be a city of low income because there is no any industry in Kaesong, and especially the people in Kaesong didn't have proper jobs before this Kaesong complex. But when this Kaesong complex opened, more than 50,000 of citizens of Kaesong city worked. So for instance, in one family, if one people of the family work in Kaesong city, then one can feed the rest of family if it is 4 or 5, the household. So as far as Kaesong is concerned, the Kaesong complex was the main, resource for survival. And also every, the month, Kaesong, complex used to be a kind of, the resource to creating a lot of hard currency. I think more than 10 million US dollars in cash to Kim Jong-un regime.
No, so Kaesong Industrial Complex, as was recognized as the only remaining linchpin of inter-Korean relations. In fact, that was the only channel of communication between South Korea and North Korea. And since the shutdown of the complex, in fact, there is absolutely no communication between the two Koreas, no official routes. Would you say that the resumption of operation at the Kaesong Industrial Complex is one that's preferable for South Korea?
The most important thing is not whether we should resume Kaesong Complex or not. I think the most important issue, is how. I am strongly believing that we should, if Kaesong Complex is resumed, then I think we should resume it in a new and, the different way from what it used to be. So, for instance, in the past, the pay of the workers, were not done directly to the workers. The workers' salary went to North Korean authority in cash. So workers didn't know how much they were paid. But actually, this I think this is really a violation of human rights. For instance, I think as a human being, everyone, no matter where he lives, in South or North, is entitled to the right of the payment for his labor. And the second thing is that on what the condition we should resume it, because Kaesong Complex was shut down because of the North Korea's nuclear test. Before the shutdown of Kaesong Complex, the world and South Korea government did not, teach a good lesson to North Korean regime. So in the past, the North Korea's history of provocations always brought a certain, the payment, and also compensation. But this time, we should teach North Korean regime that their policy of provocation would not be paid anyway.
Now, so there are different views about South Korea's policy vis-a-vis North Korea. So far, we've had about a decade of hardline policy against North Korea. And there are talks that perhaps it's time now to try out the dialogue route once again, the dialogue card. Perhaps we will be able to better our ties with North Korea should we open up to negotiations and really discuss with them on how to proceed from here on forth. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, we have to make very clear to Kim Jong-un regime, because Kim Jong-un regime, and also his father's regime, North Korean regime, has violated its commitments on nuclear issues several times. For instance, it's violated the 1994 nuclear framework agreement with Americans. And in 2005, the six-party talks, including North Korea, came to an agreement, of denuclearizing North Korea, which is called September 19th joint statement. So if we start the dialogue again, then we should start the September 1990th joint statement of six-party talk in 2005 as a kind of a starting point. But what Kim Jong-un's regime wants now is that they want to start the dialogue from present, the address. So we should not accept it, because once six parties, including North Korea, agreed, and also we have a joint statement in 2005, we should start from the agreement of 2005. If we accept the offer by Kim Jong-un regime, then that can, serve to justify those provocations from 2005 until now, another 11 years. So we should not give this kind of excuse again to Kim Jong-un.
If you continue on this way, the only people who will suffer from what you are doing are your own people. And they are also my people and our people as well. I would say in Korean, 이제 그만하세요. Or please stop it now.
What really resonated with me was, in fact, South Korean ambassador to the United Nations, former South Korean ambassador to the United Nations, Oh Jun's speech during a UN human rights meeting, where he was referring to North Korea's human rights violations, and at one point he referred to North Koreans as our people. So when we talk about North Korea's human rights violations, it's not a violation of North Korea, it's actually our issue as well. Is there a similar sentiment in North Korea amongst North Korean citizens?
Yes, especially, I still remember the last sentence the ambassador also said in that meeting, because most of the North Korean diplomats at that time saw that his last sentence. He said that that's enough. When North Koreans wants to justify his case, he said that North Korean citizens are also the citizens of South Korea, and North Korean human rights issue is also the issue for South Korea. And at last he said that that's enough. And then he said in Korean, 그만하시죠. Then the last sentence really touched the hearts of North Korean diplomats present at that seat. So when Ozun said that's enough, then North Koreans, stopped the further escalation of debate. Even North Korean diplomats are fully aware of, those terrible stories of the human rights violations. For instance, many of my colleagues were the actual victims of these human rights violations. I've seen all of these, how the people, were arrested and forcefully sent to the prison camps, how the children of very famous North Korean ambassadors were arrested and sent, how they were, brought back to the capital, So the issue of human rights is the issue which any North Korean diplomat, cannot escape. So in North Korea, there is a saying that this is a lost battle.
So what I'd like to know is there that sense of one people, that sense of, harmony and unity amongst Korean people as in general, amongst the North Korean citizens?
I think what is a significant issue which I want to emphasize is that in the past 3 or 4 years, North Korea was very, active and to some extent even aggressive in international arena on human rights, the issues. When there was the international inquiry on the North Korean human rights, North Korea started a kind of offensive campaign against America and South Korea and so far. But last year, in March of last year, North Korea all of a sudden, gave up a kind of, the final ballot of human rights vote in Geneva Human Rights Council, and in United Nations meeting last December, North Korea also, decided to give up, the final vote on that human rights resolution. So those 2 important human rights resolutions were adopted in Geneva and in New York last year without any vote. So that was the first, I think, diplomatic victory by South Korea and world community so far on North Korean human rights case.
South Korea, of course, under various administrations, depending on their I suppose, characters or their beliefs, have had opposing or different policies vis-a-vis North Korea. I remember there were times even from the North Korean regime, there was once a time where they were advocating one Korea, so in terms of like sports diplomacy, so there are more interactions between the 2 Koreas. And then came a period where there was a shut-off of that. How does it differ? So obviously it doesn't differ by administrations like South Korea because they're not elected, it's forever Kim family. Why do these policies differ at different times in North Korea?
Oh, actually, there is no any a difference in North Korean policy towards South Korea. So far, North Korea has been ruled, by one family, by Kim family, Kim dynasty, and it was one-party system. So there was no any policy changes. But why from time to time North Korea approach South Korea with different faces, sometimes with a dialogue, with smiling ones, but all of a sudden with nuclear provocations of very harsh the images. That is because from time to time they change tactics to reach the goal. For instance, in late of 1990s, North Korea was in a very, very difficult, the position because their so-called the allies and friends were gone. One day, without any pre-notice, they all of a sudden they lost the market. North Korean economy was deteriorating. Millions of people died, famine. So they need a kind of breakthrough. And at that time, the only the country who reached out the hand of help is South Korea. So at that time there was no choice for North Korea but to take that hand of help. And actually, the Kim Jong-il regime, benefited quite a lot from this, the sunshine policy for around, 10 years. So whenever North Korea wants to approach with a peaceful and smiling face towards South, that means they are in really difficulty, or in crisis.
So they
just want to buy time. So North Korea always wants to create a kind of image that it is the North Korean Peninsula who are actually, directing the cause of reunification. It is not the South Korea.
Now, for the incoming administration for South Korea, of course, we haven't yet voted or elected a new administration. But for the incoming administration, do you have a word of advice as someone from the North Korea's high elite class, having worked for the North Korean state? Do you have a word of advice for the incoming administration?
Oh, I can't say whether this is my advice for incoming, or the administration or not. But so far, to my impression, South Korea is not a kind of the country with possible predictions. Each country, what I may say, that has its own main sphere of national interest. For instance, if you see China maintains one China policy, and when President Trump wants to, shake the one China policy, Chinese, were furious, and they indicated that they would do whatever is possible in order to keep their one China policy, which I think made President Trump to reaffirm the America's one China policy. What happens to Russia? What is going on in Ukraine and Europe? Russians now are delivering very clear message to the world and to Europeans that if their interest of Russian-speaking nationals in Eastern European countries, including Ukraine, is violated, then Russia would do anything to protect it. For instance, there is a small country like Israel. Israel always sending a very clear signal to Arab countries that if there is any potential threat, to the security of Israel, they would do anything. You see, Israel always is saying that they don't mind international law or whatever. They can do anything in order to protect its people. So I think now South Korea also should send a very clear message, not only to North Korea, but also to those neighboring countries, that South Korea is ready to do anything in order to protect its interest and its people. That is the way to change South Korea as a country, with predictions.
All right, well, thank you so much for your insights and your thoughts into the state of inter-Korean relations. Thank you.
You've done a good job, and thank you very much for your hard work.